Did you know that the largest Jewish cemetery in Europe is in Berlin? It's up in the district of Weissensee, where a good friend of mine, Matti Geyer, grew up. He's a fellow tour guide and he's really excellent, and lucky for me, he just took me around the cemetery to show me some of the most famous graves, and I'd like to share all of that information with you. Let's have a look. Hi Matti, thank you so much for bringing me to your home corner of Berlin.
Thanks for having me, Johnny.
I mean, you're one of the very few, echte, real Berliners out there that I know that's a tour guide. Where can people find you?
toursofberlin.com.
So, thank you for showing me around the cemetery. But before we go into some of these more famous stories, I thought we'd give a little bit of context to this. And so this is far from the first Jewish cemetery in Berlin, is that
Exactly, right? Yeah. The first Jewish cemetery in Berlin would have been in Mitte, in Große Hamburger Straße.
So right in the center of town, near to the big TV tower.
Yeah. But the Nazis destroyed that one. And also important to know about Jewish cemeteries is that, unlike Christian cemeteries, at least in Germany, gravestones have to remain forever until Judgment Day, right? So you cannot repurpose any existing grave if descendants don't take care of it anymore. So when a cemetery is too full, that means they have to literally shut the grounds and move elsewhere, which is what happened then when the Jewish cemetery in Mitte gets closed. They moved to Prenzlauer Berg, Schönhauser Allee, still existing, but that gets too full as well. And so in 1880, they open this massive cemetery in Weissensee, which at that point is still a suburb.
Yeah, the Jewish population of Berlin by the 1880s. Let's see, Berlin is really growing at that time, with about 10 years into the empire being formed. We're deep into the second industrial revolution, or at the beginning. I'm not an expert on that, but still. Jews in Berlin will be making money with in the textile industry, law, publishing. I often think of department stores, right? These huge, exciting places. They feel like an adult kind of playground or theme park, right? Like very opulent places.
And they've only gained equal rights in that century, right? So this is the first time that a lot of them were able to make money in certain jobs and industries.
And to integrate, therefore, into society. Yeah. Speaking of which, there was a conscious integration of Jews into wider society led by the Jewish community themselves around the turn of 1700. Around this time, when this is opened, 1880, Jews are, by a growing number of Germans, like Germans as it were, non-Jewish Germans, they're seen as normal people.
Yeah.
Yeah? And you can't overstate how important that would be for a lot of people.
Yeah. A lot of the magic of the cemetery comes from the fact that it is very overgrown and it feels very out of this world in a way.
My guess for that would be that there are a lot of Jewish families who quite simply by 1945 were killed.
Yeah. And then you have no descendants left to look after the graves. And not only that, even if there are descendants left, they most likely are going to live in the US or in Israel at this point.
Yeah.
Or maybe West Germany, but this is East Berlin.
Yeah, there's not many Jews left in East Berlin after the war. About 500, is that right?
Yeah, and it's behind the Iron Curtain, so it's not easy to come here. So just for the whole time of East Germany's existence, it becomes this, it's overgrown. It becomes almost like a jungle.
Yeah.
Everything's falling apart. Close to the entrance, you realize at some point, these are all modern graves. On that, you see a lot of Cyrillic, you see a lot of Eastern European names, because the Jewish community nowadays is made up mostly of immigrants that came from the Soviet republic since the fall of the wall, right? It's very Russian-speaking, and also because a lot of them lived during communism, where we all know they didn't really care for religion that much.
Exactly, yeah. This is what I wanted to say when you talked about this in East Germany. The Jewish element of that history was not seen as very important from the side of the state. Right. Okay. So, maybe that's enough setting of the scene. People will be quite eager to have a look inside and to see the different famous or interesting names in there. So, who do you want to tell us about?
Well, since you mentioned that this is the time where a lot of Jewish Berliners had made money, got great jobs, and then also wanted to show off their wealth, as was common on Christian cemeteries. Whereas on Jewish cemeteries, actually, the idea is that everyone's the same in death. So gravestones traditionally tend to be all quite similar. So
quite
when
uniform.
you go through here, you'll notice a lot of them are just kind of
a simple black stone with a little
That's
point.
it. Yeah. But now, because a lot of the Berliner Jews wanted to mimic what rich Christians had done on their cemeteries, they would build large mausoleums, which caused often quite the discussions whether that was appropriate or not.
Yeah.
And actually, the biggest mausoleum in all of Berlin, on any Berlin cemetery, is here. On the cemetery.
And, yeah, it is very impressive, this thing. I mean, it really does dwarf anything else I've seen at any other cemetery, and I've visited a lot, but it also dwarfs by far anything else in here and nearby.
Yeah, so this was built by a man called Aschrott, who was a banker. He actually did a lot of things that made him good money, and he hired the architect who also designed the Völkerschlachtdenkmal in Leipzig.
Yes, the memorial for the Battle of the Nations.
Yeah, which if anyone's been, it's monumental as well.
It's very over the top, yeah.
And he designed this for his wife, who at that point was still buried in Vienna. He actually moves her here into this mausoleum, and he's buried there as well.
Okay, that's quite a move.
Yeah, and it's made from granite, so it's, you know,
potentially radioactive,
and also worth something. And the interesting story is that after the fall of the Berlin Wall, right, his descendants, they don't have that much money anymore. They came to the cemetery. They realized, oh, this guy's grave, it's made of granite. That must be worth something. There's gold in the top too. They asked the cemetery if they could demolish it and sell off the granite. But in Judaism, the grave belongs to the deceased person, and the cemetery said no to them.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it all stayed as is.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else did we discover inside?
So also, this is one grave that I like to point out because it's kind of a funny story. Oskar Blumenthal was a theater critic. He actually ended up running a theater as well himself, but they called him the Bloody Oscar because apparently he was quite strict.
Quite strict, quite cutting with his words, maybe. So if you were
judged by him.
Yeah, if you were a director, maybe getting a Oskar Blumenthal review was not the happiest day of the week.
Yeah. So when his wife died, he had the grave built there, but he left out his wife's birth year because she was quite a bit older than him, and that was too scandalous at the time.
Absolutely scandalous. I can't be doing with that, yeah. It's kind of funny how, I mean, what's this, about 100, 150 years ago? I think you'd look at it now and nobody would really care. These things that are important to us in life maybe aren't that important in death. But yeah, that obviously meant a lot to him at the time.
Yeah. There's also quite a few famous people buried here. I think you mentioned shopping already.
I did, yeah.
So there were some famous department stores that were Jewish owned. The Tietz family is buried here. They revolutionized shopping really in Germany, alongside the Wertheim family, who are not buried here, but those two families, they brought in all these new shopping concepts, right, of fixed prices, no bargaining, treating everyone the same, offering a big variety of products cheaper than elsewhere. So they end up founding these giant department stores that are becoming huge attractions in Berlin, in Weimar Berlin, right, and even before World War I already. And a lot of Berliners or Germans will know the Tietz family, not so much by the name Tietz anymore, but because one of them was called Hermann Tietz, and when the Nazis took away their company, they rebranded it or renamed it from Tietz into Hertie by putting together Hermann Tietz.
How strange to also kind of still, if you're going to rebrand it, to kind of honor the original founder or owner or so. But yeah, certainly Hertie is something I've come across before, and I can picture the logo as well.
Also Adolf Jandorf, who's the founder of the KaDeWe department store, which still exists.
The most famous department store in German history, I would say.
So his story is also kind of, he actually works for this businessman from Hamburg, who sends him to Berlin to found a new department store, like under this guy's name, the Hamburg guy, right? So he moves to Berlin and he does found a department store, but under his own name, but using the money from his, I guess, boss. And somehow gets away with it. And his department stores are quite cheap compared to the other big ones that I mentioned. But then he does want to compete with Tietz and Wertheim and founds the KaDeWe really as a competition to these department stores. But ultimately, the KaDeWe is bought up by the Tietz family as well.
And it's changed hands many times since, is my understanding.
It's now Thai owned.
Google it.
Who else is buried here? The Kempinskis.
Yes.
The Kempinskis, who people associate them with hotels now, the Adlon Kempinski.
And the Bristol.
And some fancy hotels across Europe. They actually start off with a giant wine restaurant, right, in Mitte, which is so huge. I believe that they had 1 million wine bottles in their basement. don't quote me on the 1 million, but it's an
They had a
enormous
lot.
amount of wine bottles.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, and so then they expand and they open another one in Charlottenburg, and only later do they get into the hotel business. But originally, it's more of a food and drink.
And you told me of something of an accident when it comes
I
to their
know.
food and drink?
And that brings us to probably the most unusual grave on the cemetery.
The most colourful.
Most colorful.
The most decorated.
Yes. Yeah.
It stands out.
It stands out. These are two couples. They're related.
Two couples who are friends, they're out for dinner.
Yeah, they go out for dinner in a Kempinski, and the two wives eat oysters that aren't very good. So they both get such severe food poisoning that they die shortly after.
Yeah, within a couple of days of one another.
Yeah, and then their husbands build them this elaborate grave here as a sign of their love, I guess, and then get buried there as well.
And
yeah.
as previously discussed, therefore that grave will always be there.
Yeah. But also just worth pointing out that even this grave that looks so elaborate nowadays would have looked incredibly run down when the wall fell. Like the entire cemetery here, everything was falling apart. There was some theft during World War II of rare materials. There were some few gravestones that over the years would have been vandalized as well. There was no larger damage by the Nazis. They didn't really care for this so much. Some bombing raids, but overall it survived. But then so neglected during that East German period again that there's been a lot of money needed in the last few years to renovate a lot of graves. But even still today, when you walk through, you realize, this is still pushed over. There's something missing here because there are no descendants left, or maybe those
very few
don't
descendants
know about it, don't care.
Live in Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No longer live nearby. Going back to World War II, there was one mausoleum that you showed me where there's a little kind of hole up in the roof.
Some of the mausoleums that are so big here were used as hiding spaces by Jews in Berlin during the Holocaust. And that one that I showed you, we know for sure that was used. It's a mausoleum by a baritone singer, I believe. It has a little hollow chamber in the rooftop.
Yeah, which we assume at the time would of course been covered up. But
Probably, yeah.
do you know how long somebody was able to hide in there?
Well, wouldn't, as far as we know, not a hiding space that someone stayed there the whole time. This is somewhere that people that were generally in hiding would use to sleep in.
Okay, so maybe they're able to...
To be here, like, full term would have been risky too, because there would have, every once in a while, apparently, would have been some, maybe Gestapo going around the cemetery and having a look. But
I mean,
for a night,
of course,
every once in a
makes
while.
sense, yeah. That's absolutely fascinating.
People would also use some of the graves to bury belongings, for example, thinking they could get back to it later.
Yeah, because so many people would have been robbed by the Nazis, and so I didn't know about people hiding that here, but yeah, again, you can see the logic, you can see why and how that would have happened.
Yeah. All right, let me tell you another story from further back, because another impressive thing here on the cemetery is the World War I section, right? Very
different, of course, to World War II when it comes to Jewish history.
Exactly.
For a lot of people, actually, a point of pride.
Pride, yeah.
Yeah, to be able to fight for your country.
Because a lot of the people at the time, Jewish people, would have probably felt more German than Jewish, I would say, and happily volunteered to fight for Germany. But even already at that time, there were these anti-Semitic conspiracies and claims that the Jews aren't fighting for Germany, they're not doing what they should do. So in 1916, halfway through World War I, right, there is this, they called it the Judenzählung. They were counting the numbers, the amount of Jewish men or Jews that fought for Germany in World War I. They were doing that to show that they are not fighting. But the opposite was the case. Over 100,000 Jewish men fought in World War I, and they kept that number secret.
And it was proportionally a very high number of people.
Very high number, but they didn't want that to be, this never became such a public number.
When I talk about this on tours, I will often say, mark that point of pride of, being allowed to fight for your country, standing shoulder to shoulder with everybody else, that, being Jewish was, okay, just a fact about you, okay? Yeah. The same way that, you have brown hair, like whatever. Yeah. It wasn't something that people cared about. Such is the tragedy, of course, that after World War I, when Germany has lost this war, of course, it is not just the Nazis, it's also kind of militaristic conservatives who kind of stroke the egos of those young men and say, you didn't lose the war. Jews stabbed you in the back, stabbed us in the back. And it's not like everybody in the country blamed Jews for the loss of World War I, but that became a very, very powerful narrative, to the point where the German president, the second president of the Weimar period, Paul von Hindenburg, he becomes one of the proponents of this conspiracy theory.
Mm-hmm. And I always add to that story that those World War I veterans that survived are often the families that decided to stay rather than trying to emigrate, because these men would say, "Oh, they're not going to go after us because I'm a World War I veteran."
They can wear their medals and show that they had fought for their country. Yeah, but ultimately, I mean, by the time we reach the 1940s, I don't think that many people are listening to that argument.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and then right behind that World War I section, we saw a grave of a Red Army soldier.
Yeah, a Soviet soldier I guess you told me he must have simply died here, in Berlin, in the Battle of Berlin.
Yeah, when you look at his name, his date, he must have died shortly after the battle was over, I believe. And so he happened to be in East Berlin, or in Berlin, and this is the active Jewish cemetery. So.
Yeah, he was 28 years old.
They buried him.
And what I noticed as well was that the text about him is written in both German and I would assume Russian, because it says Russian Army rather than the Soviet Army.
And 2 stars.
2 stars, exactly. So a Star of David, as you would expect in a place like this, on the top. But then I would suppose a communist star beneath that. It didn't exactly come with a hammer and sickle attached. It might have been one day. It certainly isn't 80 years later. But yeah, what a little oddity that he's just there.
Yeah, exactly. Another famous person who is buried here is Herbert Baum.
Yes, a resistance member, a communist, who was very much honored in East Germany as well.
Yeah. The street leading up to the cemetery is named after him, right? Who was behind the attack on a propaganda exhibition on Museum Island.
Yes, called Soviet Paradise. Yeah, it was an incredibly brave act, actually, because him and a group of people, they went to the Museum Island, to the Lustgarten, and they set fire to this exhibition during the blackouts, right? The air raid blackouts. And crimes committed during the blackout carried a much harsher penalty, right? Stealing a handbag in the day versus stealing one during the blackout. You might get a fine in the daytime, you might get your head cut off, literally, if you commit this crime against the German community, against society. But yeah, the bravery of also doing it during the blackout is very, very powerful, very impressive.
And very close to him, we have Leo Baeck, who is one of the leading figures in Reform Judaism, most certainly connected to that thriving German Jewish community. But unfortunately, he was made the head of the spokesperson, so to say, of the Jewish community during the whole Nazi era. He survives World War II, though, in the Holocaust, and then after the war moves to London, where he again becomes a leading figure in that Reform Judaism, and he's buried there, whereas his wife is buried here because she died
at 37.
In 37. So there have been calls even to move him back here, because literally no other person is as connected to the German Jewish history as he is, we could argue.
He's kind of the face of it for many people. But yeah, I did ask you, why wouldn't he have been brought back here? And you said, well, he was in London. This was East Germany. Yeah. Maybe that was just too difficult.
Too difficult. But his wife is here, so it's a bit of a shame that they've...
It's sad, yeah.
It's sad,
I wonder what it is that they would have wished for.
And then there's 2 more people that we definitely want to mention. One is the grave of a guy called Mendel, who himself is not so famous anymore, at least, but the designer of the grave is Walter Gropius.
Walter Gropius, one of the most famous architects in German history.
Yeah, founder of the Bauhaus. And the grave, I think, is so cool. Like Weimar era, Bauhausy grave.
It's very modern. Very unique. Yeah, it really stands out. And yeah, it has this kind of modern, clean design. And I guess this is something that has been running through my head as we've been talking about this place, is you talk about the Reformed Jewish community. I mean, they move away from a lot of traditions. Any changes in a religious group, any change to tradition is always controversial. Yeah. On the other hand, it's quite exciting to see that, and that kind of gives you an idea that people were kind of thriving and that they were able to have a kind of loud and proud personality.
Yeah, exactly.
And who's the final person?
Well, the final is a couple. It's a very sad story, but it's just so representative of the time. This is a couple, and the man's on the birthday of the man, he went to visit his sister. They lived in Pankow and the sister lived in Charlottenburg. So he went
talking in the Nazi era.
In the Nazi era, yeah. He went to be with his sister on his birthday. I don't know why he wasn't with his wife, but he lost track of time, and there was a curfew, obviously, for Jews. So he missed his chance to go back home. So he decided to stay the night with his sister. But he couldn't tell that to his wife, who got so worried what would happen to her husband that she actually commits suicide that night. So when he then returns home the next morning, he finds his wife dead and decided to commit suicide himself. And
beyond tragic.
They are one of over 1,500 people on the cemetery that we know of that committed suicide during that era.
Yeah, because we could safely assume that they were probably not suicidal otherwise, but
Exactly.
they were living through this just unimaginable time. Well, thank you so much for telling me all about this. We've got to the end at the right time as it's just starting to rain on us here. So this is Matty. You can find him
On toursofberlin.com.
which is also down there. I hope you enjoyed learning about this place, and I look forward to seeing you next time.